There we go. You are being recorded
Oh no.
in perpetuity. For perpetuity?
For perpetuity, I think.
For.
I
Yeah.
don't know. That's a good
But
question.
maybe both technically.
Yeah, for posterity.
There you go.
For
Posterity.
posterity. In perpetuity
In
for
per
posterity.
there you go.
That can be
You
the motto of the show.
I really don't have one, so
Okay. Well,
that's
there you
not.
go. You're
I might
welcome.
as well. It is iterative.
Yeah.
I roll things into the show as if they seem like good ideas.
Okay. This was not a good idea.
well, I'm waiting it out for like a year. I'm gonna do the
Okay.
show for maybe a year, and then we'll see if it was a good idea or not.
Right,
Or it was
right.
just a waste of my time. Uh, Lost in the Dark and Other Excursions. Quite a
Guilty.
title. Quite a title. Excellent. I expected nothing else, but it
Oh,
was
thank you.
excellent.
Thank you.
I breezed through it, read it in 2 settings. Um, lots of great and interesting stories. And I have a million questions for you that we don't have time for, really. I'm going to try and keep it succinct.
That's okay. Let's go for the million. Let's see how many we can reach. 600,000. Let's go.
Some of them, I don't know if they'd be of interest to an audience other than me, but uh,
It's always best to just go with like weird questions because people will be like, "Oh, I haven't heard that before."
I try. I really do. My first, you appear in at least 3 of these stories. You,
Me.
by name, John Langan, appear in the stories. And maybe not you specifically. Like you have a fictionalized version of you, it
Right,
seems,
right.
in these cases. But I guess that was like my very first like raw question was like, why you? Was that just an instinct for those stories?
Yeah, in the case of like Lost in the Dark, the title story, right? Um, I was concerned with a found footage, well, a film that presents itself as if it were, found footage. So, Blair Witch Project type stuff, right? Um, in which it is actually a documentary that has been repurposed as a horror film, right? So I was right from the get go, kind of playing with what was real and what wasn't real, or maybe levels of reality, and so I thought that including myself in there as a character was a way of contributing to that. So yeah, people reading, the book the story appeared in originally, or now reading it now, would read this book and be like, wait a minute, what is this like a nonfiction piece? What's going on here? So that and I didn't want it to be overwhelming exactly, but it seemed more interesting than just trying to invent an identity for the narrator. I was like, no, it could be me. That's or at least, a slightly adjacent, like a version of me in a reality adjacent to this one.
I mean, in Lost in the Dark, it is could be you, like because it's not, you're not directly interacting with
Yeah,
anything
yeah. I'm just
supernatural.
yeah. The only thing I I don't think I ever made it quite clear that this is supposed to be an article for Rolling Stone. So that would have been the only thing at the time, is Rolling Stone has not asked me to write any articles, nor do I really expect them to. So that would be the only thing that might make somebody say, this isn't you. How did this guy get into Rolling Stone?
I mean,
Who does he know?
I don't know. One, I couldn't name a single writer for Rolling Stone right now, or other than Cameron Crowe, like that
Yeah. Cameron
the
Crowe and who was the guy? Michael Gilmore
yeah.
did a lot of work for them. He was the I guess infamous Gary Gilmore's younger brother, and he became quite a respected journalist.
But I mean, I just haven't. So if you said, "Oh, John Langan, the horror novelist and short story writer, he's going to be writing for Rolling Stone," I'd be like, "Yeah,
Sure, why
okay,
not?
sure,
Yeah,
why
yeah,
not?"
yeah.
Yeah, but in the other ones, in Errata and the one with the lizard, was the lizard the lizard mummy.
Oh, Oscar Returns from the
Yeah,
Dead.
Oscar Returns. Those are, especially in Oscar Returns, that very sinister version of you, because
Yeah, it's a
you
mean story.
burned down a house.
I did nothing of the my lawyers have advised me to say I did nothing of the kind. Um,
But I
yeah,
mean, it does. Is that more of just the realism? You want to give that feeling of this is potentially could be really happening?
yeah, I think in the case of errata, that was a story that was written specifically for Ross Lockhart, my publisher's birthday, and Ross and I go back. Geez, we go back a ways. Uh, the late mid to late 2000s. So we've known each other for a long time. So it just, again, it kind of made sense to since this was written very specifically for that occasion, it made sense to refer to the two of us and you know things that were happening there. Um, yeah, Oscar was it was just a weird little idea that I had, and I'm trying to, you know, the writer Daniel Brown had contacted me about writing a story for a mummy anthology, and I had written a story called Anskua Island, which was about one kind of like bog mummy that was reanimated, and I wanted to write like a different kind of mummy, but I didn't want to write Imhotep rises from the tomb or something.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
I think that I'm not saying that you couldn't do one of those stories today, but I think to do it properly, you would really have to think about it a lot, and you would have to think about the kind of cultural politics involved, right? The history of
Yeah.
colonialism and imperialism and the like. So I wanted something that was a little bit different. And years ago, my son and I, well, my whole family, we'd gone to Paris so my wife could do this academic conference, and my son and I went to the Louvre, and I was like, I'm going to show him the Mona Lisa. And he was much more interested in the fact that they had mummies there, and specifically that they had animal mummies there. They have like mummified crocodiles and cats that were also taken from those Egyptian tombs. And so I think that was kind of what started my brain working in that direction. Oh, a mummified animal. Well, what would that, you know, what would happen there? And
It's
um,
very effective. I cannot outline enough, especially that ending. Just
that, that is a rough ending.
so striking. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a rough ending. Sometimes some endings, I'm like, oh yeah, well, whatever, you know. But there were some endings where I'm just like, oh man, that was rough. That was rough to those characters. That really hurt them, you know. And I kind of knew it was like the right ending, but I was still like, eesh.
I wonder
That's
it's you sort of like that's the thing where it's like the
yeah. There's definitely like an aspect of I'm doing this to us, you know, and it's
I mean,
funny, you know.
go
I
ahead.
wrote a story that will appear in my next collection about Paul Tremblay. It's this big long story where Paul is turning into a vampire and eating his family,
Oh my
and
god.
I mentioned this to him, and I was like, "Oh man, I don't know," you know, and he was like, "No, no, it's fine." I was like, "Okay, well, if you've said it's
If
fine,
you
so
say it's okay.
you say it's okay." But yeah, sometimes I think the other thing is sometimes you reach for situations that are familiar to you. So my younger son and I have been in the car a lot over the years. You know, driving, especially since he was really the fisherman in the family. We've just driven a lot of places, and so that initial scenario of just plopping a father and son in a car and saying, "Here we go," and here's you know, conversation, storytelling, and so on. That just kind of made perfect sense. And we've done over the years. We've done a certain amount of pet sitting, not a lot, but for friends, mostly dogs. Um, so that was also like, oh well, suppose this happened, suppose this hadn't worked out, the this obligation hadn't worked out as well as it did.
Yeah. I've had someone kill a frog of mine when they were
Oh
pet
man,
sitting, so there was
by
a little
oh,
bit of an echo.
by accident, or like were
No,
they
not
like,
on
take
purpose.
this, Robbie?
No, it was the same. It was literally overheated. Same. It's the same thing.
It's very easy for it to
Yeah,
happen with small animals. Yeah.
yeah. Little amphibians and and reptiles are very susceptible. We already and you already mentioned Lost in the Dark and the found footage aspect of it, and
Mhm.
you already kind of mused about this in the afterword, about how literature has used quote unquote found footage that as a motif
Yeah.
for a very long time. And I don't know. I don't even. And as I was reading Lost in the Dark, and the fact that it was this kind of meta exploration of a movie inside of a documentary, that it becomes a movie, but you're watching the real footage that they co-opted to. And there's like, I don't know, like a lot of your stories, these nested narratives of like a
Oh yeah.
story within a
Yeah.
story of a story. And you kind of muse about that. Oh, it kind of has always existed in literature. It has worked for a very long time. And is like the fact that, and I was really like, I was literally thinking that as I was reading Lost in the Dark, I was just like, wow, I'm like, because I see this on the internet a lot. People like, I want found footage books. Give me a found footage horror rec,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
a book, not a movie. And it seems like movies and like podcasts and video games have kind of found this much more recently than literature did. And kind of along you using you as a narrator, is it that era, like that, the authenticity you think that adds to that? Is it the fact that this is like a relic of an event that makes it feel more real, makes the story feel more real, makes the found footage movie feel more real?
Yeah, I kind of wonder if it doesn't, on some level, the found footage kind of conceit, if that doesn't tie back to older traditions of storytelling. The person who comes and says, "This thing happened to me," and with so you have like the frame narration of the we were all hanging out, and then Bob came in, and Bob was like, "Oh, this crazy thing happened to me." We were like, "Bob, you look terrible. Tell us about why your hair turned white," and Bob tells you this story, and he his testimony, and often the scars that this event has left on him, they testify in some way. They make they give his story a certain kind of a weight that it might not have if it were just presented as a straight story, as it were. And so I think that in I think found footage might pick up on that in a way. It's like, look at how grainy it is. Look at how the all the shots are terrible, and look at how things are off center, and that like it's very sort of amateurish quality. And its disjointedness argues for it being a real thing. You watch Blair Witch, and I suppose the most unrealistic thing about it is that they keep filming the whole time, right? That they or there are a couple of little blank spots, but that by and large, the whole thing, whoever it is, manages to think enough to keep the camera going, right? But if you can get past that, it becomes very compelling, because you're just like, we're being presented with this thing, and what is it? And in that case, the marketing was such that it was presented, the film was presented as if it were real, right? Or so, on whatever date, whenever these filmmakers went into the woods, and all that was found was their footage, and we put it together, and here it is. So there was a frame that you kind of knew about before you went into the movie, and then of course there was the movie itself.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, because you kind of use that a lot in your stories of this. Oh, you presented with a narrator, and the narrator tells a story of sometimes encountering another storyteller, and this
Yeah, yeah.
storyteller is telling a story to them, and they're recounting that story. And it's just the the in Lost in the Dark, for example, I lost track, and I think it is the thing where, like, if the story goes on long enough, you kind of lose track of this trail of quote
Right.
unquote
You're like,
authenticity.
you're inside the story and the story and the story, and you're kind of lost in the dark.
And it is very effective. And also, like, cave stories always really get to me. It's always the
A, a
claustrophobia and
dark,
the
yeah, a dark cave is very dark. Like it's you're out to be outside at night, when even with no moon, it's dark, but it's not dark in the same way that the interior of a cave is.
yeah. And there's the pressure of the fact that you can so easily get lost. I don't know. There's all those. I don't know. I've read lots of quote unquote creepy pasta about the scuba divers, going
Yeah, cave
cave
diving,
diving
that
and all
sort of
that
stuff.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, and they always attend that it's real and there's actual. And I'm like, but again, I forget that it's fake. I forget that it's a story. I
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
buy
Well,
into it
that's yeah,
immediately.
and I think especially like in that case where it ties into anxieties that you have, and you're suddenly like on some level, you know, you're some whatever higher part of your brain is like, come on, we know this isn't true. But then, you know, the more primitive regions of your brain are like, no, no, who cares if it's real or not? We're afraid of this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's the I would for like I lived out in the woods in Florida as a kid, and our fun was going to a spring. That's the where we
Yeah,
swam for fun,
yeah,
and there was a big hole, and people got lost down there. There was
yeah.
accidents, and it's like it. I guess it's that kind of primal memory about that. I this is the thing I'm just always been curious about your writing in general. Do you ever, because of that motif that I of stories within stories, do you ever push back against that? Is that just come naturally when you're writing a story, or is it just it happens and you just lean into it?
I would say mostly or as often as not, like I lean into it. I I would like to be able to write a story at some point that's just like from point A to point B. Um, I wrote a really a short novel called Saphira that's the title story, and it is, you know, it's like 50,000 words, so it's technically a short novel in my third collection, and that's a kind of a chase narrative where this woman is chasing a monster, um, but even there the it's not straightforward because in alternating chapters you're getting the chase, right, but the chase keeps cycling back over itself because this woman is going through this monstrous transformation as this is happening, and different parts of her body are changing. And so the first chapter deals with her eyes, and then the third chapter deals with her teeth, and so on. And then in between those there's the story of how we got to this point. Why is she on this chase? And it's a kind of braided narrative, and that is um it's more straightforward. I have an even earlier story called The Wide Carnivorous Sky, which is in the collection of the same title, which is about a group of soldiers who have encountered a monster while fighting in Fallujah in Iraq, and and they have this brief, horrifying encounter with it. They survive it, but then they're affected by it. They're sort of traumatized by it, and they decide they're going to have to try to lure it back to kill it. But even that is presented, you know, out of temporal order. You know, things happen at different moments. So the number of straightforward, you know, let's go from point A to point B stories I've written, maybe non-existent. You know, like there's because I think even even when I think, okay, this is going to be like a straightforward kind of story, like a character will still have a memory or something that goes on for a
Right.
paragraph or two because I'm trying to flesh them out as a character. Um, I want them to live for the reader, and so for me that often lies in story or varieties of story.
I mean, I I a lot of that comes up like one I read your afterword, which explains a lot of the. I was writing in questions as I was reading short stories, and then I went to the afterword. I'm like, oh no,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
John explains everything, and I had a couple of questions I had to erase. I'm like, oh, he already gave an answer to that. Um, but a lot of this comes back to the to Snakebit,
Hmm.
uh, which I loved more than I mean. It's only half fiction, really. It is a story, but it's also fiction. It's fiction and nonfiction at the same time.
Yep.
Which is again, I've never seen anything like it before. And I would say for any writers who are listening or watching this, you should buy this collection merely for Snakebit because it is you're literally riding shotgun with you as you write a story effectively,
Yeah.
and it opened up a little. There's a couple pathways in my brain I think that it opened up that I hadn't really thought about, but it is this a lot like in retrospect. My questions for you are like it feels very much like because Snake Pit, you walk through your thought process of
Hmm.
I'm I made this character. He is very similar, and like, and you're also explaining why you love horror and what horror allows you, what avenues to pursue in a story, which
Right.
I also adored because I feel very similarly to you. Um, and So one, that story's the whatever the piece, whatever you want to call it, it's incredible.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's fictitious enough to be a story.
yeah, I mean there is a whole story in it. There's a whole piece of fiction in it. It's just tied along with, well, a diversion of, well, what do I do with this character? What do I
Right,
do? And um, you explain, you're like, well, how do I find it? What do I do with it? You know, you talk about this character who's kind of a, I don't know. You mentioned Ulysses, I believe, but it's like this, you
yeah, yeah,
know,
it's
educated man who's suffering from a, I mean, midlife
midlife
crisis.
crisis. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's if you read a lot of later 20th century American fiction, this is the character who shows up in novels by people like John Updike and Richard Yates and Philip Roth and others. You know, this sort of unhappy white man,
yes,
unhappy straight white man. You know, who's
yeah.
like, oh boy, I'm not happy. What should I do? And he usually winds up having an affair.
Let's destroy my life. I'm
Right,
bored. Let's
or
destroy my
several,
life.
you know,
Yeah,
sometimes I mean, Updike kinda makes adultery into, like, almost sacramental, you know? But, so, yeah, so I kinda, um, when I started out writing, one of the things that my earlier stories did, was they kind of bounced themselves off certain American writers or American themes. So my very first couple of stories were kind of riffs on Henry James, and I wrote a story that was the novella in my first collection, Mr. Gaunt, is called Lao Cohen. Um, and it's a kind of riff on Saul Bellows' Seize the Day. And that was just something I was kind of having fun doing. And every now and again, you know, when I wrote The Fisherman, that was a riff on Moby Dick. So every now and again, I kind of like to do that. I kind of like to bounce what I'm doing off classic American tropes, you know, literature, whatever. And that I've used this sort of disaffected college professor contemplating adultery. Like that's a kind of a shorthand for me for a certain kind of fiction and a certain kind of approach to fiction that I often find very constricting. Um, so yeah, it just and you know
it's, I
the
guess, appropriate for in snake
right,
bit.
right, yeah, right. It's
Yeah.
sorry, pun intended.
No,
Those of you
it
who read the
works. I
story.
love it.
Um, and so yeah, I but I also believe that there is almost no idea that is like bad in and of itself. You know that can't be treated. That was how Henry James used to talk about it. He would be like, I've got this idea, I've got this little anecdote I want to write down, and I think I might be able to treat it. Um, and as if he were like a I don't know if he was thinking. He probably wasn't thinking about photographic development, but sort of. That's what I think of. As I think about putting the piece of paper and all the different baths as you try to bring the picture out, and then depending on the mix of chemicals you put it in, you can emphasize certain aspects of the picture. So yeah, the hapless college professor having his midlife crisis seems really boring, but add a monster in, and then that to me is immediately much more interesting. And that gave me the opportunity, as you say, like to sort of show the reader this is how I do it. Kind of this is why I do it. This is
Yeah.
what the addition of the supernatural, the supernormal adds to my writing.
Yeah. I mean, it works in like four different ways. So it's a, you know, I was kind of stunned by it as I was reading it. And the ending, that the bit where you discuss the the different endings is, I wrote and literally wrote an ending to a manuscript today, so it's right on the top of my head.
Hmm.
Um, and you talk about, there's the happy ending, and then there's the sad ending. You start with a sad ending. He gets killed. Then you move on to, well, the opposite of that. He's
Right.
victorious. He survives. But then you're, no, those are, it's a false dichotomy. There is a third,
Yeah.
there's always a third ending. There's another path that you should, and usually you say, what, find something that resonates
Yeah.
with an audience, something that sticks. You compare to fast food. Like, fast food's not bad, but it's not going to be that memorable most of
Right.
the time, and you're searching for something memorable. And it's that question of like, Is it just that when you find it, it sticks to you that way? That right ending?
Yeah, I mean, it's often a kind of a process, you know, like when I'm writing, I usually don't know what the ending is going to be. But usually when I'm writing, there comes a point during the writing when I'm like, oh, this is where I'm heading. This is where and then the story starts to I start to sort of shape the story in that direction, maybe go back and make some revisions to say, okay, this is where we're going to wind up. And sometimes that ending's okay. But you know, my first novel, House of Windows, I was absolutely sure of what the ending to that novel was going to be until I reached the ending. And when I reached the ending and wrote the ending, I was that's too cliched. That's too kind of like Twilight Zone. Like, oh, look at that twist. And I decided that I wanted to keep that ending, but I wanted to have the character who's telling you about this ending say the same thing, but I don't know if that was what happened, and then offer a couple of alternative endings. So it's something that I've done. I haven't. I mean, that was 2009, I guess, that novel was published. So it's been a little while since I did that, but I think that a good ending, at least a good ending, is a resonant ending. You know, even an ending that makes you angry is in a way a good ending because it affects you in some way. You know, an ending that just makes you say, that's not much of an ending. Whereas I think that endings that in some way stick with you for good or for bad. I mean, I hope for good, right?
Right.
But even for bad, um, the chances are you're going to remember that ending, and that's what we want, right? We want our fiction to stick in their brains.
Yeah, stick in their craw.
Yeah,
Uh, uh, it, it's I don't know. There is I really appreciated this because you are rationalizing this. You are like, and you say like, oh, I could just say, well, I like what I like,
right,
and call it a day. And you're like, well, that's not very interesting. That doesn't leave us anything to talk about. Um, and it is this idea of like, well, I see so many writers talk about how they followed a path and this is where they ended and that is it. They didn't have any say in it. They didn't think
right.
about it, about their character choices, about that. I'm like, and it's always very opposite of how I have operated. It's always like, well, yeah, of course I encounter things as I'm writing, either when I'm outlining, if I'm outlining, as I'm writing the story, that I go, oh, that's the way this needs to go. I need to swerve this way. I need to do that or this. But there's always still conscious thought about how do I end this? This is where I'm going. I don't like that. It's not good. I need to find a way out. Um, and
Yeah, absolutely.
you're the snake bit is, I think, the first time I've seen someone actually like elucidate. Hey, this is here. These are the paths I could take. I'm going to take this one. And I again, everyone listening, go. It's worth it for Snake Bit to read Lost in the Dark, especially writers. Right? I don't know. It's. I'm always like just trying to pick at new things to like open up my brain a little bit.
Yeah,
Uh,
this collection wound up a lot of the stuff in here. You know, I should say that like I organize my collections almost by like sort of strictly, okay, I wrote these stories from 2017 to 2020. Here's the order they were published in. Boom, and then there's a new story like either last or second to last usually, and that's kind of it. You know, I have good friends, Laird Barron, Paul Tremblay, who really labor over the order of their collections of the way the stories appear. They don't pick all of their stories. You know, they put them. They're like, this story doesn't fit with what I'm trying to, you know, my sort of thematic concern and for this collection. And I tend to be much more a believer in just synchronicity. Let's see what happens when we put these stories together. And I often find it part of the reason I write the story notes is I think I may have even said this, that it increasingly feels like this weird form of not quite autobiography, but kind of, you know, it's like, what was I thinking about when this was going on? You know, like a parallel autobiography or something, a secret autobiography. And so one of the things that often happens is when I come to write the story notes and I look over the stories, I think to myself, wow, I was at this point, like this was really interesting to me. So I was really interested in messing around with narrative. At this particular point in time, there are collections. I mean, as we said at the beginning, all of my stuff kind of messes around, but but my probably my third collection, Saphira, probably has the most stories that are like more normal, I guess, more recognizable.
I mean, it's you.
And well, and now in this collection, I actually didn't realize, to be honest, how how wacky a lot of these stories were. Um, but my previous collection, Corpse Mouth, there's some experimental stuff in it, but I think again there the stories are a bit more normal, relatively speaking. A bit more in the traditional direction, whereas here there's much more of a veer into just all kinds of weird stuff that I was not completely conscious of doing. I think every now and again I become aware, oh man, you've written a lot of experimental stuff lately. Let's see what happens. Like, can you write like a more normal story? Or man, you've written a lot of these like more normal stories. Let's mess around. Let's see. Last this past year I was invited to contribute a story to an anthology inspired by the songs of the band Neutral Milk Hotel.
Okay.
And
Well, this is all horror stories.
yeah, well, just they could be whatever,
Okay, all right. I mean,
I right,
I'm,
it's not exactly
I'm
like if it
relatively familiar with Neutral Milk Hotel. I don't immediately go, "Ooh, scary."
yeah, yeah, I mean, if it had been, Rob Zombie, you would have been like, "Oh,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course," you know? But, and I thought to myself as I was writing the story, I thought, "I wanna write this story as if it's like tracks on an album." I mean, not literally, they don't rhyme and there isn't the musical notation, but that's kinda how I want it to be a series of paragraphs, and each paragraph is like the track on first side A and then side B.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, every now and that was inspired in part because I was writing for an anthology based in on music, on a band. So that happens sometimes where the subject of an anthology I'm invited to really suggests this is how you should tackle this. But then there were other times where, yeah, I just think, wouldn't it be cool if you told this story backwards? Or wouldn't it be cool if the person who's telling the story has no idea actually about the story, what the real story they're telling you, you know? Um, yeah,
I'm.
it's just one of those things I do.
I mean, I really appreciate the weird. Again, I'm. I want at this point in my life as a reader, even I want weird. I want different perspectives. Like I want to be challenged. By alternate forms, even, which is, there's one here that's told through footnotes, which I was really, really, again, very novel and very
Yeah, I had
intriguing.
a professor friend years ago who argued that readers of genre fiction are in a sense more sophisticated than a lot of readers of more conventional fiction, because genre fiction is often quite willing to mess around with convention, um, and um, and to obviously in terms of character type and setting, but even in terms of presentation, genre stories for a long time have messed around with the way that you can tell a story, and I think there's actually some truth to that. Not every genre writer likes this, of course, or genre reader, excuse me, although really genre writer and genre reader likes this, but I think that there's a certain amount of willingness to let you go, to give you enough rope to hang yourself.
Yeah, I mean, there are the breeders that I've encountered. There are guys who come to me and say they like my books because all my books are like under 300 pages, and
Right.
they're relative. They're like, oh, we like that's literally a guy who owns all my books, and he's just like, every time I release a new one, he's like, I like it because it's under 300 pages and I can read it fast. I'm like, okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm glad I please you.
Yeah.
Even and then I wrote a weird one, and he's like, I don't know about this.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. I tried something new.
Right. He's like, how dare you?
How I mean, I was like, it's okay. You don't have to like it. I don't need everyone to like every single one of my books. Um, all right, I could keep asking questions about Snakebait forever, but we need to move on to the next segment because it's time for the second act.
Okay.
Second act is broader questions, less book specific questions, even though it's obviously still you. So there's not wherever you go, there you are.
Right.
And your first question is from my last guest, who is Alma Katsu, and
Ah,
she
okay.
asked, and she was, she was. I put people on the spot for this, so because I'm going to ask you a question for my next guest as well
Sure, sure.
at the end of this. But she was a little bit. She's like, I want to ask John a good question. I'm like, and so she settled on. Do you have a specific approach when developing a story? Is it always the same approach? Is it change per story? Something like that?
So I would describe it as a kind of a like multi-stage process. Um, and I would say that I'm always on the lookout. Like I'm always just aware, trying to be aware of stuff, and jot stuff down in notebooks sometimes, or just, kind of keep stuff in mind. I'll think to myself, man, I would really love to write a story about, a mermaid. Um, and I'll just sort of file that away, and other things will float around in there as well. I try to continue to expose myself to as much different art as I can. So I try to watch movies that are more than just Marvel movies. I love Marvel movies. All right, don't at me, people. Um, but so I try to watch movies and read books and read poetry and look at artwork and take all of that into myself, kind of trusting that it's all just kind of fermenting, I guess, and maybe fomenting inside me. And I think I use this metaphor all the time of I think that your consciousness is like an apartment building, and where we hang out mostly is, or our psyche, maybe I should say, is like an apartment building, and where our most conscious part of us lives is in the top, is in the sort of penthouse area. But that there's stuff that's going on all the way down to the first floor, to the basement, to the sub basement, the boiler room, whatever, to the caves underneath. And that there are things that are moving back and forth among different levels all the time. Sometimes we dream about them, and sometimes we don't, or at least we don't remember those dreams. And then there comes a moment where some little detail causes some idea that's almost been put, all these different parts of it have almost been put together to shoot up to the penthouse, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, here we go. This is what we're going to do for this particular story. When that happens, though, that sort of larger process, if you will, what really needs to happen beyond that is I need an opening line or two in which I can hear the voice in which the story will be told. Sometimes that's the narrator's voice, but as often as not, it's just the kind of rhythm of language that this story will need in order to get written. And until I really have that, it's difficult to get going. And I'm usually able to find it once I have like that sort of vague cloud-like sense of what's going on. I'm usually able to figure that voice out. Sometimes the voices come to me like for a story I don't know, like it's obviously it's been sort of sent up a little too early. They put it in one of those little vacuum tubes and shot it up, and I'm like, oh, this sounds great, but what is this? What is this connected to? Um, so yeah, I appreciate being given prompts. I enjoy being invited to anthologies like the Neutral Milk Hotel one, because it's like, what am I going to do with this? And it gives um, it gives the little fornits working in the lower levels of my brain the chance to pull stuff together to say, you know what, we can finally do something with this that we saved in the corner, and we're going to bolt it to this, and then we're going to send it up. So yeah, it's there are stories that every now and again, I'm sort of writing on my own, or whatever, and I'm like, I'm going to have to put this aside for a while. I'm not 100% sure what's next, or some more urgent idea suggests itself to me, and I'm like, oh no, better do this first. Um, but yeah, it's roughly the same, I would say. The Probably the big difference, and I'm not even sure this is a difference, is I mostly at this point, actually that's not even true anymore. All right, forget all that. No, no, I mean, what I was going to say is that I don't really talk to anybody about them, but that's not really true because, you know, once in a blue moon, I'll talk to Paul. Well, actually, I talk to Paul about once a week, but I'll talk to him or I'll talk to Laird Barron. Sometimes even my son and I are out walking the dogs, and I'll be like, I'm thinking about this story. Sometimes with my wife, you know, we'll be sitting around and she'll be like, so what are you up to? And I'll be like, I'm kicking around this idea. And sometimes what I just need is to say it out loud, you know, to just kind of
Yeah.
like verbalize it, hear the idea, and then be like, but you know what? It would be cooler if this other thing happened. I know this is speaking a lot in vagaries. Um, and I apologize for that,
You're,
Alma. I'm sorry.
you're,
I'm nervous. Alma's a spy, you know, she's gonna have me
I
killed. There's
I know.
yeah,
She's
some
a
guy setting up in the trees right now outside my house, and he's like, that was almost good enough answer, Langan.
she described you as a masterful storyteller, I believe, when I told her it was going to be you.
Oh,
So
she's far too kind. She's
uh,
far too kind, and she's, I would say, right back at you, Alma Katsu. Please don't have
I
me shot.
I will come back to you for a question for our next
Mhm.
guest at the end of this segment. So it gives you a few minutes to let it matriculate.
Okay.
Um, who's a writer more people should be reading?
Oh my goodness. Where do I
And
start? Um, I think among writers of my generation, so you know, we're all like one side or the other of 50 right now. I'm 56. But you know, there are other writers who are in their early 50s, people like Laird and Paul, Stephen Graham Jones, you know. Um, I think among our generation, Michael Sisko doesn't get enough love. Um, Sisko's, I don't even know how many novels Sisko's written at this point in time. And we sort of claim him for horror fiction because he's just so damn weird. And his stuff is like no one else's stuff out there. And I guess he would consider himself a horror writer as well, but this is horror in the most strange outre varieties you can find, despite which it's very readable and often very funny. Cisco is a superb performer of his own work. Recently, Clash Books has brought out his last two novels. He's a novel called Black Brain that's just come out, um, and yeah, I would recommend them as a place to start. Among and also just Olivia Llewellyn, who doesn't write a tremendous amount, but she's an insanely talented story writer, who writes. I guess you would say stories of erotic horror, but this is not like, oh, you know, like teenage boy erotic horror. This is adult, visceral, vivid, disturbing horror. She's a collection called Engines of Desire, actually another one called Furnace, and you could do a lot worse than just buy those two collections and read them. When it comes to younger writers, Nadia Balkan has a new collection coming out called Issues with Authority. Nadia wrote a collection called She Said Destroy. Man, I mean, I want to say it was published almost 10 years ago, I think. And and this is only your second collection, although she publishes stories with reasonable frequency. But she's just so good. She's really really just at just an amazing talent. I think probably a lot of people know about Mariana Enriquez, but her novel Our Share of Night, I think, is one of the great accomplishments in or out of genre, novel wise, in man, the last certainly in the 21st century, maybe a little bit longer than that even. So those would be places I would say start. But then you know I'm also thinking, in terms of like writing for younger readers, Laura Senf, Senf, wrote a novel called The Clackety, which is absolutely wonderful, and it's the beginning of a trilogy. I'm trying to remember. There's The Night Housekeeper. So I have them on my shelves, and The Loneliest Place. Um, and those are also just terrific stuff. I mean, there's such an abundance of good writing right now. A newer writer like Alex Gonzalez, his novel Wrecked, Rekt, is just it's just jaw droppingly good. And then there's someone like Rachel Harrison who is certainly becoming better known at this point, but I still am not sure she's the household name she deserves to be. So that's just a um, Haley Piper, who is just a ferocious stylist, and has just she did an early novel called Benny Rose, the Cannibal King. Actually, it was a novella. And she has a new novel out called A Game in Yellow, which is about a couple. They've been together for a while. Things are getting a little tepid in the bedroom, and they decide to spice things up. And they're like, "Hey, there's the King in Yellow. What's that? Maybe this will help." Um, yeah, Haley is also just terrific.
I was going to say I'm going to try and link to all those people in the show notes so that people can go hunt down those books. But that's what I want. I want all the book recs.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
um, what's the best piece of advice you followed?
Write every day.
Right every day. Simple, but not easy.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Until I did started doing that, I was someone who wanted to be a writer and had written some stuff, but I think that was what really that's what makes the difference. And as with all the most simple advice, right? It's so difficult to follow.
Yeah, it's the in my novel writing 101 class I've done a couple times. It's make it it's a practice.
Yep.
Writing is a practice,
If the
and you
muse
have
is late to work, you start without her, as Joe
exactly.
Lansdale likes to say.
Yeah, sit down. You gotta sit down at the typewriter and bleed.
Yeah,
Hence
yeah,
the
yeah.
title of the podcast. Um, let's see. This is a weirder question that I've recently started using. What's the strangest videos served to you in the algorithm?
The strangest video. I don't know. I notice a day or two ago, I got an AI rendering of a scene from one of the Star Wars cartoons. I think it was Clone Wars, where Obi-Wan and Darth Maul have like a second fight. And I've seen the animated version, and this was done by AI, as if they were. And I didn't watch the video. I was kind of offended that it popped up, and I get it, right? They're like, oh, Star Wars. This guy looks at Star Wars stuff, but I just really felt like get lost AI. I
Yeah,
don't need you.
I tried. I try not even give it my eyeballs. It's
Yeah,
really
yeah, yeah.
when because it again. I go on Instagram and I see a video and like they're like, "Oh, you watched it for 8 seconds. That means you like it.
Right,
Here's
right,
more." And I'm like, It was 8 seconds, and it was insane. I was trying to figure out what's going on.
right. Why am I
Not if
getting
I,
all this?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Why am I? And then suddenly my entire feed is this whatever that strange thing was. Uh, I told Amakatsu about Karjitsu, which is a thing I routinely get in my feed, which I don't really want to get. I got
I
women's
have no.
Karjitsu is jujitsu done in cars. That's all it is.
Clearly, we have too much free time. What do you say
I
we go do jujitsu in some
I
cars?
mean, it's a
Moving
stationary
cars? Well, of
station.
course.
No, it's stationary.
Oh, then they're cowards. Forget it. I only want to see your jujitsu
Moving
done in
cars
moving
jujitsu.
cars as they're spinning around in the middle of a bridge.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think the more insidious thing is the I get videos that is just interviews, which I'm not opposed to seeing an interesting person to give an interview question, but it's like their faces have been scrubbed by AI, so they're all
Yeah,
like smooth
yeah,
and weird. Like I just see Shaquille O'Neal, but
yeah.
like
What's
he's
the
been
need for that? Yeah, yeah,
scrubbed of all his humanity. I'm like, what's going on?
yeah.
Um, do you have your question? Do you have a question for our next guest?
Do I find out who the guest is,
I'll
or
tell you if you want to know.
did Alma want to know? She did want to know, didn't she? That's
She
how
did
she.
ask, yes.
Okay, that's because I can still see the laser pointer on me. Yeah, tell me who the next guest
It
is.
is David Washburn, an indie author. He has a Taylor Swift inspired horror novel, I believe, coming out
Oh,
tomorrow.
good for him.
Yeah.
Um, okay. I was going to say, what is his kind of strangest inspiration? And
What's your
he can answer that in whatever way he feels appropriate.
okay? What's your strangest inspiration? That's a good question.
A couple of years ago, the Bram Stoker convention was held in Pittsburgh, this lovely hotel, and it was held the same weekend as a Taylor Swift concert. And so the hotel was full of all the horror people, all in their, um, uniform black, and then all the Swifties and their glitter. And there were also several weddings being held at this hotel. So there were all these people in their suits and, opulent, you know, lovely dresses, all this kind of stuff. So that was an amazing weekend.
I wrote down at some point on one of my little idea note cards Taylor Swift as Eldritch God. I wrote that down at some point.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm
I
like
could
she's
absolutely see her
she's
as
she's
that.
she's powerful enough.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
That's
and you can
that's
imagine that, all her fans getting into this kind of like the Maenads, Bacchus's followers, who just would like lose their minds. You can imagine that, and if you're in their way, man, a bunch of like psychotic 7-year-olds are just going to tear you to pieces.
Swifties will get at you. Um, that might we'll see what's your strangest inspiration might make the list. Might make my permanent list.
Oh, good, good.
Make my
Okay,
ongoing list because that's a good question. I like that a lot. Um, are you ready for the third? Are you ready for our third segment? You ready
I am ready
for?
for Act Three. Yes.
For the. It's time for blood. Is what I've been taken to saying.
Okay.
This is about trouble, hardship, struggles with a work in progress, or in general. It doesn't have to be about a work in progress. If that's what's
Mhm.
on your mind, that's what we can talk about. Is there? I know you're. There's a novel. I know there's a novel coming. Is that
Yeah, I mean, that has more to do, honestly, with just my inability to say no, or at least maybe, to anthology invitations. When I started off writing or publishing, I should say, the early 2000s, I would see people who were more or less my contemporaries, maybe a little bit older, appearing in different anthologies, and I would think, oh man, why wasn't I invited? And even when there were open calls for anthologies, I couldn't. I am a slow writer, and so I just couldn't make the deadlines. And at the time, I said to myself, "Man, I want to get to the point where I'm being invited to all the anthologies." And while that is not the case, still, it certainly is true a lot more. And I'm fairly willing, if somebody writes to me and says, "Hey, are you interested?" Um, I'll say, yeah, let me see what I can come up with. I mean, no promises, but um, and in part it's because every anthology prompt is like this little challenge. It's like, okay, like, oh, the Taylor Swift horror anthology, right? And you think that's a terrible idea, but then you think, yeah, but like, what if it wasn't a terrible idea? How would you do that? How would you make that good and compelling? So years ago, the writer Michael Wehunt wrote a story called Hello, in which I feature briefly as a character. And I was like, and I'm supposed to have written a story within that story, right? And I said to Wehunt, I am going to write that story, you son of a. And that's still in there. That's still like one of those things I'm going to do. And so I'll be sitting down to work on a novel, and I'll be like, oh, but I've got to do that Wehunt story. So I would say that when I look at the success that friends like Paul Tremblay and Stephen Graham Jones have enjoyed, undoubtedly part of that is because they've made the very wise decision to focus on novels, and people very much want to read novels. I want to read novels. I love novels, right? So I think that taking the time off, and just saying no, or I can't right now, I'm working on a novel, would really be the wise thing to do. But there's a combination of that persistent desire to be asked, that persistent, and which goes along with the fear that if I say no, I won't be asked anymore. They'll just be like, all right, pal, well, you've obviously, you think you're too good for us, and we're going to go on to someone else. um so yeah, I think I have the same. I think every writer um struggles with self doubt, struggles with feelings of, I wouldn't exactly say worthlessness, but worrying about how how worthy your books are, maybe. Um, we're all beset by comparison, or whatever you want to call it. We're all often beset by envy. We shouldn't be. Um, and I remember talking to a friend once who was, complaining about this and our his and relative stature, as he saw it, like relative to the people like Stephen King say.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to him, yeah, but it's kind of like, it sounds kind of lame, right? But it's like when you're outside at night and you look up into the night sky, all the stars seem to be equally distant to you. I mean, if you know a little bit, you're like, I know this one's farther than this one, but forget that, right? They all, so from where most readers are, I think, like anybody who's published a few books seems to be, everybody seems to be in the same, in the same sphere. And yeah, obviously some stars glow brighter, or whatever you want to extend that metaphor, obviously King or whoever does. And the thing is, when you're up there among the stars, yes, then you sort of realize, oh, I'm up here, but I'm not, Stephen King is way up there or something, right?
Yeah.
But that kind of perspective of realizing, yes, but we are up here is really, really important to maintain. And I think that mental health wise, um, a lot of writers get in really, really bad places and really dangerous places for themselves, um, by worrying a lot about stuff like that, which again, completely understandable. There's, you can't help it.
There's a
Um,
certain amount of introspection kind of necessary. I don't know. I wouldn't say always present in a writer, but in most writers, there's a certain amount of just in the nature of the work. It
yeah.
is
And I think
it's
if you've done
introspective by
any,
nature.
I look at myself as, um, I almost completed a PhD. I'm what do you call it? ABD. So I spent a lot of time learning these kind of critical skills, to apply to works of literature and the lives of the writers and all this kind of stuff. And of course, you apply it to your own life, to your friends' lives, and it's it's fine, I think, to reflect on these things, but when anything becomes damaging to you, then it's time to distance yourself from it. So I think, it's fine to analyze your own work, but I think when doing that prevents you from writing or makes you feel, why should I be writing? Then you need to step back from that. And I think that it's again, it's fine to um, look at where you're at and your time as a writer and where your friends are at and so on. But as they say, comparison is the thief of joy. So you have to be a little bit careful to not to let that overwhelm you. And you you know it sounds as if, right, I'm going to burst out into song, accentuate the positive, right?
Yeah.
But that's true. You do need to be grateful for what you have. And I don't think it'll ever, I don't know, if there are writers qua writing who have enough, right? So it's
Yeah.
possible, right, that you may not need $1 billion, right? You may not be one of those guys, right? You may just be like, hey, I wish I could make enough money to support myself and not have to work any other job. Yeah, sure. You might even be able to achieve that, but even then, you're still going to find yourself looking potentially at other people and why are they getting this notice? Why is everybody talking about them and they're not talking about me? Or don't they realize, I did this first, right? Or I did this better, or whatever. So I think you really need to guard yourself against that. And it's depressing sometimes, but useful to read the lives of other writers and realize, oh man, Edgar Allan Poe doesn't end up so well for him, right? I mean,
No.
now we're like, oh, Poe, you're so great, but same thing with Herman Melville. When Herman Melville dies, all but one of his books is out of print.
Yeah.
And it'll be almost 29 years until he's kind of rediscovered, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, Moby Dick's the great American novel." So I think having that kind of longer view can be helpful to you. It can at least be sobering, um, but it can guarding against that kind of thinking can be really, really important, I think.
No, I mean it's. I always try and keep it a healthy perspective of, do I want to do more? Do I want to have more readers, sell more books, make more money, blah blah blah, do may get awards, whatever? Yes, of course I do, but I have to temper that with, there's many a million variables and factors outside of my control of what can I control. I can write the best book I can. I want to tell the story I want to tell, and that's the first step, and then everything after that, gotta not let it drive you crazy,
Yeah, yeah.
which is a part of it.
Once a couple of times, I've had men actually come up to me and at signings and say, like I lost my wife last year, and I read your book, and it really helped. Um, I mean, what more could you ask for than that?
Yeah,
Like I then I immediately feel like a jerk for wanting anything else,
yeah,
because I'm just like, look, I gave this and that was um um that was more than I could have hoped for, and if you've um if and it doesn't have to be that profound, but if someone is having a bad time, a bad day, a bad week, a bad month, if they're going through a breakup, if they hate their job, whatever, and they can sit down and read your work, and your work brings them pleasure. Your work makes them feel like they're part of something else, something that's more rewarding. That's not a small thing.
no,
I know we're all like, "Where's my movie deal?" But I think, and again, I get it, right? I understand, but I think that is ultimately what we're writing to do. We're writing to communicate in this kind of deeper sense, not in the sense of I'm going to give you a message, but that I'm going to share this experience with you, or I'm going to really create this thing where we're going to have ultimately a shared, if delayed, experience. I'm going to put this thing out there. You're going to come to it. You're going to react to it, and there's going to be this thing that's kind of greater than the sum of its parts. And if you're able to do that for one person, that's a big deal. That's not something to be taken lightly.
no. It's those things that, like, I don't know, that it's the value is not strictly dollars and cents.
Yeah,
The
yeah, yeah,
I get something out of, yes, I recently had someone tell me they bought a book for me at a convention, and then 3 days later they said, "Oh, my wife's in the hospital. There was an emergency. I've been reading your book to her at night." Well,
yeah, yeah,
when
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah.
that is, I like immediately I'm like, that is like an incredible, like, I'm
Right.
glad I know, like, I'm just glad it brings her and you some comfort, right? It's
As
just
long as long as he doesn't say, "And it's making her worse." I mean, it's
No,
like
I mean, with the story they were reading, I'm like, that's bringing comfort. Okay. I
right,
mean, I get comfort from lots of weird places, so it's not.
right.
I wouldn't.
Okay, this is not that podcast, Rob. Okay,
I meant more like dark, grim things. I went and saw Long Walk, the new movie.
oh, how was it? How was it?
It was good. I have some mild criticism about it, but it's also like famously impossible to adapt
You were like,
story.
What's up with all the walking? Why are they walking? Couldn't anybody just get in
I wanted more walking. To be fair, that was my actual one of my. I would like
couldn't
more, but
anybody just get in a Jeep? What
but
is
is
happening
but
here?
it is incredibly bleak.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
but and like I expected it, but the people I saw it with were taken aback by how grim it
yeah. Yeah,
was.
yeah.
And I was like, well, I used to watch Seven as
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
a comfort film, and Seven is just awful. Like, it's so dark.
Do
It's
you know, though, it's odd because I love that movie, and I don't know if 7 is quite comfort level with me, but it's not too far off. Like, I'm so fond of it that in part because of the integrity of its vision, the way that it takes nothing back,
yeah,
what's in the box?
yeah.
And I used to when I was. I mean, I'm old enough that I used to go to video stores, and I remember when
I've
Seven
been to,
was.
I went to video stores. I've been to video stores in my
Okay, so
life.
do you remember
And
when Seven was released on video? It might have been
I was not allowed
VHS.
to watch it when it was released on
Oh,
video. I can
well,
tell you
one
that.
one of the video stores I went to, they had a large cardboard box with just a
Oh
strand
my
of
god,
blonde hair coming out
that's
of the top of it, hanging up there with Seven on the side. That was brilliant marketing.
I wanted to watch it desperately. I believe I was 10 years old, and my dad was like, "No, no, 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 not yet. You're not ready for that, Robbie." And he was probably right. That was a
Good,
little too young. I
good.
was by 13 or 14. I think I was ready, but I think Seven was comforting me because at the very end of the film, the last line is Morgan Freeman. He's like, I believe he's quoting Hemingway, where he's like, the world is a good place and it's worth fighting for."
Yeah, the world is a fine place and well worth fighting
Well,
for. Yeah,
and he's like, I agree with the second part.
yeah,
And I always strangely felt that like that's actually very, I don't know, like optimistic, because it's like anyone with eyes can see, yes, there's terrible things that happen every single day, and it's very easy to get beaten down by it, but it doesn't mean you stop. It,
yeah. Well, I think it's the idea that it's that even if it's not a fine place, even if it's riddled with problems, it's still well worth fighting for.
yeah.
And that is, yeah, that's a powerful kind of affirmation. And given everything that we've come through, um in that film, right, it would be weird if Morgan Freeman was like, yeah, it's all
Where
roses.
everything's great.
It's
Yeah. Well, when I asked you about the novel, I was just going more like, well, I know it's coming out. I mean, I don't know. The moment I heard that, oh, John Langan has another novel coming out, after the
yeah,
Fisherman,
yeah, yeah,
this
yeah.
monolith, this incredible thing, and now you have a new novel. I'm like, where is it? I need it. Give it to me. But I don't also, but I, it's also the process of like, well, you have to write it. It has to get, it's not, it doesn't just appear out of nowhere.
I'm gonna George R. R. Martin the shit out of this thing. Just no, no. I'm sorry, George. I'm sorry. Um,
He's not
he,
going to hear this. Don't worry.
he could buy me and sell me 100 times
Yeah.
over. He and Alma both. He'll have his shooter up there in the tree next to us. You're making fun of George, huh?
Yeah.
We're sick of these jokes. No, I have a whole bunch of novels actually, that I want to write. I've got actually two that I'm working on right now. One is this kind of sort of follow up novel to The Fisherman, or at least it's set in, I guess you'd say, in universe or something like that. And it takes a small detail from the middle of The Fisherman, and that is and that's the sort of central point, I guess, or MacGuffin or something to the new book. But it's about a famous anthropologist who did a lot of like really important work, but then later in his life um, became like a sort of a Bigfoot fan, I guess you would say. Like he was always sort of interested in cryptids and such, but from a kind of anthropological perspective. But then he decided that there was actually this real cryptid in the Catskills called the Catskill Devil. And kind of ruined his reputation, but made a lot of money going on like the Discovery Channel and doing like,
Yeah.
uh,
Reality shows.
reality shows, documentaries, and while on a trek into the mountains to do something related to the Catskill Devil, he disappears, and all that's found is his bloody knapsack. And the assumption is that he's been attacked by a bear or something like that and dragged away. And his wife, his fourth wife, because he's led a Hemingway-esque life, his fourth wife has him declared legally dead, which you can do in the state of New York after only 3 years. Um, and and then after he's been gone for just about 10 years, his widow, I guess, contacts his children and a couple of students that he was very close to and says he's alive. He's alive, and he's in the mountains, and he wants you to come and see him. And it's about that. It's about that trip and what happens on that trip.
I'm, hey, stop digging. You hit oil. I mean, I was going to, whenever you're going to release a novel, I'm going to just buy it. I'm not going
Well,
to,
thank you,
yeah, I
thank
mean,
you. In fact, I'm not even going to bother writing the rest of it. Everybody, just I'll take your money now.
I mean, I would do that, honestly.
But
There,
there'll be another one. There's another one called the Tunnel, which is further out, but which takes place. It takes place much closer in time to the events of the fishermen, and it's set in the tunnel that was dug under the Hudson River to bring that water from the Catskills down to New York City.
okay.
And this was constructed, about 1,000 feet, I think it is, under the surface of the river. It's kind of astonishing to think that this was done in the early 20th century. And while the workers are about halfway across the their route, uh, they find a door carved into the rock, and something gets out, and it's not very nice, and it's in plot wise, in some ways, it's a very straightforward kind of a story. But it's also in the construction, it's very very Byzantine. So um,
Well,
that
it is a tunnel. It should be, you know, archaic pathways.
oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's more just that like um, I tend to for novels I tend to frame them in reference to other works of literature. So the Fisherman was sort of written in response to Moby Dick in part, although a lot of Pet Cemetery creeps in there as well, as people have pointed out to me. Um, the Cleaving Stone is kind of a riff on novels like mostly Faulkner's Absalom, Absalom, which is
Oh my
about a
god.
father. Yeah, a father who wants dynasty. He wants like to have this kind of immortality for himself. Um, and you could also see it as like boomers versus Gen X and millennials or something like that. And then the Tunnel draws inspiration from a novel by Joseph Conrad called Lord Jim, which is about this guy who commits this terrible act of cowardice and then spends his life trying to make up for that. So one of the people who's the guy who's the foreman of the workers in the tunnel um, has committed an act of terrible cowardice during the Spanish American War, and he's still kind of fleeing from that, and it haunts him and it affects his decisions.
This is again the moment you're like, oh, I wrote a book that's in reaction to Faulkner. I'd be like, okay, let's get into this. Let's dig. Let's
Well,
go.
it's all like, look, man, if and I would say this to anybody, like, you're a writer, it's all there for you. I I've returned to this lately, I guess, or more recently. Years ago, I met this Irish writer named John McGarn. He was doing a reading at SUNY Albany, and I went to see him read. And he'd written this novel called Amongst Women that I liked, and he read some short stories. And afterwards, I went up to him, and he'd probably grown up in the shadow of like Joyce and Yeats and all those guys. And I said to him, like, man, how do you do it? How do you grow up like in the shadow of those writers? And I was thinking about them as like oppressive influences, and he looked back at me and said, I think of them as allies. They're great allies to me. And I was just like, oh man, like what a way to think about the tradition you're part of, like rather than thinking about the anxiety of influence as a literary critic like Harold Bloom puts it. What about thinking about it as just these guys are there, they're all there offering you a hand. They're like, what do you need? Let us help you. Come on, we're here. We're all in the same boat. Like, they're all in the same boat. They're all dead. um but we're all participating in language and in storytelling and in writing together. So what is it we can give you? Take what you need. And I think that's a more useful way to think about to think about influence and to think about those people who came before you. I think um, it gives you permission to do what you want to do.
Yeah, that's pretty dang good stuff.
No, well, thank you. I just made it up.
I mean, that's the joy of it. You're like, it just comes. It's like all this. Um, I don't want to keep you forever. Uh, before. I don't want you to turn into a root vegetable as
It's
previously
okay. Yeah,
mentioned.
that's fair enough. I do not want to become a rutabaga, but
Yeah, that was a New York Times crossword answer in the past couple days, I believe. Rutabaga.
the times.
Don't get me started about crossword critiques. I could talk for hours about it. Rant about New York Times crosswords.
A horror story as a crossword puzzle. Oh,
That's
that's
take that for what you will, listeners. If you could
yeah.
see,
Geez, okay, go take it, people. See what you can
yeah,
do with it.
see what
Right
you can
where
do.
all the clues tell the story, like help to tell the story.
Yeah, man, I gotta write that down. Where can here first? Hey, people should go read Lost in the Dark. I
Okay,
read it; it's great. I mean, you should. Anyone listening to this probably knows who you are, and they hopefully have already purchased all your books. If you haven't, go do that. Fisherman Changed My Life. You haven't read that, you should read that too.
thank you.
Um, John, where can people find you online? Plug anything you'd like to plug,
Oh, I'm
all
in
that stuff.
all the usual social media places, except for Twitter. I got off that.
Yeah, that's pull the ripcord.
Yeah, I just I should have been off it a long time ago, but the Nazi salute thing, I was like, I don't really think I can be part of this.
No,
Um,
it was time.
yeah, and but I'm still on Facebook or whatever it's calling itself, and I probably spend most of my time on Blue Sky at the moment. I'm on Threads and Instagram and such. I have a blog that I update like sporadically. Mr. Gaunt is the name of the blog. So if you look for like I think it's like Mr. Gaunt, the web presence for John Langan or some BS like that. You'll find that, and I go through these phases where it's like a manic depressive blog, where most of the time nothing's going on, and then there's like this flurry of activity where I'm like, I have this story coming out, and that story coming out, and oh, here's a video. So yeah, that's a place to look as well. And yeah, the collection's the big thing at the moment. I appreciate the tremendously gracious response that people have given to it. It honestly, after my last collection, my previous collection, Corpse Mouth, I was really thinking, okay, maybe that's going to do it for new collections for a while. I kind of felt I kind of felt that the 5 collections I had published up to that point were a nice kind of compilation of stuff that I'd written, and I didn't want to wear out my welcome as a short story writer. But after Corpse Mouth, almost immediately, people kept saying to me, "Well, when's the next one coming out? When are the And I was like, okay, maybe I'll see if this will work, and it seems it has. So I've got enough for like 2 more collections beyond this, but I would really like to try to publish at least one novel next, and then one novel, and then another collection of stories after that. I would be for a lot of or writers writing with big presses, the rule is like 2 or 3 novels and then maybe a collection of stories. I would be happy to alternate novel stories, novel stories. We'll see where that goes.
That's always we'll see where it goes. It's always that. It's always for every writer. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Uh, it was so nice to have you on. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute delight to have this conversation.